From the outside, it looks like an ordinary Pennsylvania public building, constructed in a popular 19th century style: Corinthian columns, imposing clock tower, well-pointed brick facade. But inside this courthouse, Americans made choices that shaped the coming of their Civil War.
I just don't think people in Cumberland County realize the historical significance of the Old Courthouse. This is arguably the most important, best preserved Underground Railroad site in Pennsylvania, and it's one of the best preserved 19th century courthouses in the country, with historical associations that have all kinds of connections to the coming of the Civil War.
The Old Courthouse in Carlisle dates from 1846. It was the third structure built on the public square used for judicial proceedings in Cumberland County. The first colonial-era courthouse had been a log building on the opposite northeast corner of the square. In 1766, the county erected a new brick courthouse on this southwest corner, but with the structure running north to south and with the clock tower and the entrance facing High Street. That building, however, burned to the ground in March 1845. Citizens of Cumberland County then raised $50,000 to build a new courthouse, one that would subsequently serve them for over 100 years. Yet within only a year after its opening, the Carlisle Courthouse became associated with the nation's bitter fight over slavery and some of the most important Underground Railroad episodes of the era. In 1847, a young slaveholder from Maryland died while trying to recapture 3 fugitives outside this building, the first known death of a Southerner chasing slaves north of the Mason-Dixon line. The case began in the mid-1840s when slaveholders from around Hagerstown, Maryland, vowed to stop the growing traffic of slaves running away into Pennsylvania. In early June 1847, 2 of the men dispatched by the Hagerstown slaveholders had managed to track down 3 runaways in Shippensburg. But on bringing the trio to Carlisle, the slave catchers found themselves accused of kidnapping. Slavery had been abolished in Pennsylvania, but Cumberland County was full of residents with strong opinions about the peculiar institution, both those in favor of protecting the property of Southern slaveholders and those determined to see the institution abolished everywhere. With Judge Samuel Hepburn presiding, and a growing body of angry residents both inside and outside the courthouse, there were a series of confused arguments over how to proceed. Dickinson College professor John McClintock was present and observed afterward that neither the judge nor the lawyers knew anything about the law. In 1847, the state had just enacted a new personal liberty law that protected free black residents from kidnapping. McClintock went to obtain a copy of the statute, but by the time he returned to the steps of the courthouse, violence had erupted. As sheriffs were moving the accused runaways, McClintock reported that black residents of Carlisle, seeing their fellows about to be carried away into interminable bondage, made a rush and carried off the woman and child. James Kennedy, one of the Hagerstown slave catchers, was badly hurt and later died from his injuries. There was a national uproar. 15-year-old Dickinson student Moncure Conway, son of a prominent Southern family, later recalled, "My brother and I, like others, packed our trunks to leave college." The Conways remained, but Professor McClintock and nearly 36 black residents of Carlisle stood trial that summer for riot. William Meredith, future Secretary of the Treasury, represented the men. The local jury acquitted the college professor and many of the accused, but convicted 13 of the local black residents. Judge Hepburn sentenced the defendants to 3 years of hard labor at the state penitentiary in Philadelphia. However, in a sign of the deepening national crisis, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned the convictions during the following spring. As the McClintock riot case had developed in 1847, the Carlisle Courthouse and Judge Hepburn also presided over another pivotal trial involving fugitive slaves. Abolitionist Daniel Kaufman stood accused of hiding 13 runaways from Maryland at his farm near Boiling Springs. To send a signal and to try to stop the growing Underground Railroad effort to help fugitives, Judge Hepburn ordered the noted Boiling Springs abolitionist to pay $2,000 in fines. an extraordinary amount in those years. Kaufman's case was appealed and eventually retried in federal court, but he ultimately was compelled to pay more than $4,000, one of the largest fines ever assessed for violating fugitive slave laws. Not all the slavery cases in the county courthouse went against abolitionists. In 1850, and again in 1859, anti-slavery lawyers successfully brought suit against Maryland men accused of kidnapping black residents from the county. The 1859 case, involving the Butler family of Dickinson Township, created a local sensation and resulted in a notorious slave catcher being forced to return to Maryland to liberate a black man, his wife, and their little child. Not long after the Butler incident, John Brown launched his raid against slavery at Harper's Ferry in western Virginia. Some of John Brown's raiders escaped into the Cumberland Valley, and one of them, a Pennsylvania native named Albert Hazlitt, faced extradition hearings from the Carlisle Courthouse in October 1859 following his arrest near Chambersburg. Hazlitt was among the last of John Brown's raiders to be executed on March the 16th, 1860. The Civil War began just over a year later, but you might say some of its earlier battles were fought here at the Old Courthouse.
When people imagine the Underground Railroad, they think in terms of hiding places and secret tunnels, but it was fought in courthouses by lawyers and outside in the streets by crowds. It was about resistance. And when people need to visualize the Underground Railroad in the North, I think they need to see it in terms of places like the Old Courthouse in Cumberland County. It's a venue for the open and defiant fight against slavery that occurred across the North in the years before the Civil War.
During the Civil War, Carlisle experienced the conflict firsthand when the Confederates invaded Pennsylvania in June of 1863 as part of the pivotal Gettysburg Campaign. Confederate forces passed through the Cumberland Valley and occupied the county seat briefly. Then, just prior to the Battle of Gettysburg, famed Confederate cavalry general J.E.B. Stuart ordered the burning of the Carlisle Army Barracks and the shelling of the town. The Old Courthouse endured minor damage, which is still visible on the columns out front. Following the Union victory in the Civil War, local residents dedicated a monument in 1871 to the more than 340 men from Cumberland County who died during their service in the war. The courtyard then became a place for several military memorials and community monuments, and the Old Courthouse continued to serve Cumberland County until 1962. That was the year the new modern courthouse was dedicated across the square on the site of the old market building. The Old Courthouse has since been retained for various county offices and for various community functions. But, despite some modern improvements over the years made to the other sections of the building, the second-floor courtroom appears much as it did in the 19th century, when it witnessed the nation's grave battle over slavery and provided the setting for several of the leading incidents that shaped the coming of the Civil War.